6 years after a night with her, CEO spots a girl bearing his mark. Could this be my child? My dearest, most loyal, most beautiful family? How are you, my heartbeat? You are the calm in my chaos, the light in my darkest nights. Every moment I breathe, I thank God for blessing me with a family so true, so loving, so divine. You are my miracle, each and every one of you. Your love is my power. Your support is my foundation. Now receive this gentle prayer wrapped in purest love. Dear loving Father, pour oceans of peace into the hearts of my precious family. Let their worries fade like stars at dawn. Surround them with warmth, silence every fear, and guide every step with grace. Bless them with health, joy, and a love so deep it heals everything within. Amen. If these words touched your heart, show your love. Like, comment, and share. Because we are not just a family, we are a forever bond. Type it with pride. I am with my brother, and let the world know. We rise with love, we stand in unity. The world had transformed into something savage and unrecognizable. Rain lashed against the landscape with such violence that the coastal road had all but disappeared beneath angry torrents. Lightning split the night sky with jagged daggers of brilliance, illuminating the churning sea below the cliffs for heartbeats before plunging everything back into darkness deeper than before. Terry Lamb cursed as his car sputtered, coughed, and finally surrendered to the storm's fury. The sudden silence felt eerie after the engine's persistent hum. Only the drumming of rain remained, a chaotic symphony against the metal roof, punctuated by thunder that seemed to shake the very earth. He tried the ignition again. Nothing. His phone showed no signal, leaving him stranded in a tempest that seemed determined to swallow the world. Through rain-blurred windows, Terry could just make out a faint golden glow in the distance, the only light visible along the deserted coastal road. Shelter. The rain hit him like physical blows as he stepped outside, drenching him instantly. Wind whipped his dark hair across his face as he trudged toward the light, each step a labor against the storm's will. He was not a man accustomed to feeling powerless, yet nature had reduced him to exactly that. A vulnerable human at the mercy of elements far greater than himself. As he drew closer, the light source revealed itself, a small cottage with an adjoining structure that looked like some kind of studio or gallery, perched precariously on the edge of the cliff. What would normally be a picturesque view of the ocean was tonight just an abyss of darkness and fury. Terry reached the cottage door and pounded, the sound barely audible above the storm's wrath. No response. He knocked again, harder, rainwater streaming down his face and neck, seeping beneath his collar and chilling his skin. Finally, the door cracked open, secured by a chain. A woman's face appeared in the narrow gap, cautious, suspicious, and so strikingly beautiful that for a moment, Terry forgot his predicament entirely. Her eyes, somewhere between blue and green, reminded him of the sea on calmer days. "Please," Terry said, raising his voice above the howling wind. "My car broke down. I just need shelter until the storm passes." The woman hesitated, those remarkable eyes scanning him with a wordless calculation. He couldn't blame her. A stranger appearing on your doorstep during a storm was the beginning of every horror story ever told. "There's no phone service because of the storm," she finally said, her voice surprisingly melodic despite its wariness. A particularly violent gust of wind nearly knocked Terry off his feet, sending a spray of rain through the partially open door. The woman flinched as the cold water hit her. "I'm not dangerous," Terry said, knowing how hollow the words sounded. "I just need shelter, please." Something in his voice, perhaps the genuine note of vulnerability so foreign to him, seemed to sway her. After another moment's consideration, she closed the door. Terry's heart sank until he heard the sound of the chain sliding free. The door reopened fully. "Come in before you drown out there," she said, stepping aside. Terry entered, bringing a puddle with him onto the worn wooden floor. The interior was small but undeniably cozy, a living space that doubled as a studio, with canvases in various stages of completion propped against the walls. A wood stove in the corner gave off gentle heat and the scent of cedar. "Thank you," Terry said, suddenly acutely aware of his sodden state. "I'm Terry Lamb." "Christina Jackson," she replied, still keeping a cautious distance. "There's a towel in the bathroom, first door on the left. You should dry off before you catch pneumonia." The bathroom was tiny but clean, decorated with seashells and bits of sea glass arranged in artistic patterns. Terry dried his face and hair, studying his reflection in the small mirror. He barely recognized himself, disheveled, vulnerable, without the carefully maintained facade he presented to the world. Something about this rawness felt strangely liberating. When he emerged, Christina had set a steaming mug on a small table. "It's just tea," she said, answering his unasked question. She'd moved to stand near a cast-iron poker by the wood stove, a position that didn't seem coincidental. "I can't drive you anywhere until this storm lets up, but the weather report said it should pass by morning." "Thank you," Terry said, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. "I'm sorry to impose like this." Christina studied him with those sea-colored eyes. "What were you doing out in this?" "The weather service issued warnings hours ago." Terry took a sip of tea before answering. "I was, driving to clear my head. I didn't pay attention to how far I'd gone or how bad the weather was getting. Must be some heavy thoughts to need that kind of clearing," she observed. Lightning flashed, illuminating her face more clearly. She was younger than he'd first thought, perhaps mid-20s to his 34 years, with a delicate strength to her features that intrigued him. "Sometimes I drive to remember who I am beneath everything else," he admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. "The sound of the engine, the empty road. It helps me think." Christina's expression softened slightly. "I paint for the same reason," she gestured to the canvases surrounding them. "To remember who I am beneath everything else." Thunder boomed directly overhead, making them both jump. The lights flickered once, twice, and then died, plunging the cottage into darkness, save for the orange glow from the wood stove. "Perfect timing," Christina muttered. Her silhouette moved across the room. "I've got candles somewhere." "Let me help," Terry offered, carefully navigating around furniture he could barely see. Their hands collided in the darkness as they both reached for the same drawer. The brief contact sent an unexpected jolt through Terry's body, a current more powerful than the lightning outside. Christina must have felt it too. He heard her swift intake of breath before she pulled away. "Here," she said, voice slightly different than before. She pressed a candle into his hand, her fingers brushing his palm. "There are matches in the same drawer." Soon the cottage was bathed in the warm, flickering light of a dozen candles. The transformation was remarkable. What had been merely cozy before now felt intimate, almost enchanted. Shadows danced on the walls as rain continued its relentless assault outside, somehow making the interior feel even more of a sanctuary. Christina uncorked a bottle of red wine. "Since we're stuck here, might as well make the best of it," she said, offering him a glass. "Unless you'd prefer to sit in awkward silence until dawn." Terry smiled, accepting the wine. "I've had enough silence lately." They settled on opposite ends of a worn but comfortable sofa. The wine was surprisingly good, warming Terry from the inside as the wood stove and candles warmed him from the outside. As the storm raged on, their conversation flowed more easily, moving from casual observations to deeper waters. Christina told him about her art, how she captured emotions in color and texture, how she'd converted the adjoining building into a small gallery that attracted just enough tourists in summer months to sustain her through the winters. Terry spoke of his love for architecture and design, carefully avoiding mentions of wealth or status. finding himself more interested in sharing his passions than his accomplishments. "I've always been drawn to creating spaces that make people feel something," he said, gesturing with his wine glass. "Buildings that inspire or comfort or challenge." Christina nodded, tucking her legs beneath her on the sofa. She'd moved closer as the night progressed, the initial wariness gradually replaced by curiosity. That's what art should do. Make people feel. Otherwise, what's the point? Exactly, Terry said, struck by how perfectly she'd articulated his own thoughts. Too many people go through life numb, surrounded by things that mean nothing to them. Lightning flashed again, briefly illuminating Christina's face in stark white light. In that instant, she looked almost otherworldly, beautiful in a way that transcended conventional attractiveness and touched something deeper, something essential. "Is that what you were driving away from?" she asked softly. "Numbness?" The question pierced through Terry's carefully constructed defenses. "Yes," he admitted, the word barely audible above the storm. "Sometimes I feel like I'm watching my own life from a distance, going through motions that used to mean something but don't anymore." Christina's eyes held his, unflinching. "That's a lonely way to live." "It is," Terry agreed, finding strange relief in acknowledging this truth he usually denied even to himself. "What about you? Are you lonely out here?" She glanced away, taking a sip of wine. "Sometimes, but I'd rather be lonely on my own terms than surrounded by people who don't see me." "I see you," Terry said, the words emerging before he could consider them. Christina looked back at him, something shifting in her expression. "Do you?" "I'm trying to," he answered honestly. "I'd like to." The air between them seemed to change, charged with something neither had anticipated when he'd knocked on her door hours earlier. Christina set down her wine glass and moved closer. On the sofa, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of paint and lavender that clung to her skin. "Tell me something real, Terry," she whispered. "Something you wouldn't normally tell a stranger." He considered for a moment, then said, "I'm afraid that I've built my life around things that don't actually matter." Christina nodded slowly. "I'm afraid that I've hidden from life under the guise of artistic integrity," she countered, offering her own confession. Outside, the storm reached a crescendo, rain hammering against the windows as if demanding entry. Inside, something equally powerful was building between them, a recognition, a possibility, a connection that defied the brevity of their acquaintance. "What are we doing?" Christina asked softly, her face now inches from his. "I don't know," Terry answered truthfully, "but it feels like the most real thing I've felt in years." Her hand rose to his face, fingertips tracing his jawline with artist's precision. "The storm will pass by morning," she reminded him, a question in her eyes. "Yes," he agreed, understanding what she was really asking. "But right now, there's only this moment." When their lips finally met, it was gentle at first, tentative, questioning, giving either the chance to pull away. But something ignited between them, something neither had expected to find on this storm-ravaged night. The kiss deepened, years of loneliness and longing channeled into this single point of connection. As candles flickered and the tempest raged, they discovered each other with increasing urgency. Clothes discarded, skin against skin, whispered, confessions and promises neither was certain they could keep. In Christina's small bed, with rain drumming on the roof above them, they created a temporary world where nothing existed beyond their intertwined bodies and the emotions crashing through them like the waves on the cliff below. Later, lying in the peaceful aftermath with Christina's head on his chest, Terry watched shadows play across the ceiling and felt a contentment so profound it almost frightened him. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt wholly present, wholly alive. What happens when the storm ends? Christina murmured against his skin, the question weighted with implications. Terry's hand traced lazy patterns along her spine. I don't know, he admitted, but I don't want to think about that yet. Christina nodded, pressing a kiss to his shoulder. Then we won't. They made love again as the storm gradually subsided, more slowly this time, memorizing each other with hands and lips and whispered appreciations. Eventually they drifted to sleep in each other's arms, the sound of gentling rain a lullaby. When Terry woke, the first faint light of dawn was filtering through the windows. The storm had passed, leaving an eerie stillness in its wake. Christina slept peacefully beside him, her dark hair spread across the pillow, her face softened in repose. He watched her for several long moments, something aching in his chest at the sight. Last night had been unexpected, transformative, but in the cold light of morning, reality began to reassert itself. Their worlds were separate, their lives set on different trajectories. What had seemed possible in the storm's isolation now felt like a beautiful dream from which he must inevitably awaken. Carefully, so as not to disturb her, Terry slipped from the bed and dressed quietly. He found paper in her studio and wrote a note, starting and discarding several versions before settling on simple honesty. Thank you for the shelter from the storm, for everything. He placed the note on the pillow where he had slept, then added something else beside it. A thick envelope containing $50,000, more cash than most people saw in months. It felt insufficient, almost insulting in the face of what they'd shared, but he couldn't leave her with nothing but memories. With one last look at Christina's sleeping form, Terry let himself out of the cottage into the fresh-washed morning. The world seemed renewed after the storm's fury, the rising sun gilding puddles and dripping leaves with gold. His car, miraculously, started on the first try. As Terry drove away, watching the cottage recede in his rearview mirror until it disappeared. Around a bend, he felt as though he were leaving part of himself behind, the most authentic part, the part that had emerged briefly in Christina's candlelit world of truth and connection. He told himself it was for the best, that last night had been a beautiful aberration, impossible to sustain in the real world. But as miles accumulated between them, the emptiness inside him grew, a void that seemed to echo with the sound of rain on a cottage roof and the memory of sea-green eyes that had truly seen him, if only for a single storm-swept night. Chapter. To you, 6 years of silence. 6 years could feel like both a lifetime and a heartbeat. For Terry Lamb, they had become a strange limbo, success without satisfaction, achievement without joy. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his waterfront home, watching dawn paint the horizon in shades that never quite matched the ones in his memory. His fingers absently touched the small sketch he always carried in his wallet, a rough drawing of a cottage on a cliff, waves crashing below. He'd drawn it from memory the week after that stormy night, afraid he might someday forget the details. Terry had never returned to the coastal town, though the urge to do so had nearly overwhelmed him a dozen times. What would be the point? She had probably moved on long ago. He certainly should have, but on quiet mornings like this, with only the sound of waves for company, Terry could still feel the ghost of Christina's touch on his skin, still see the candlelight reflected in her, see green eyes, still hear her whispered confessions against his shoulder. It was just one night, he told his reflection in the window, the same words he'd repeated for 6 years, never quite believing them. "Mommy, look! I made a boat!" Christina Jackson smiled as her 5-year-old daughter proudly held up a folded paper creation. "That's beautiful, Lily. Is it going to sail on the ocean?" Lily nodded enthusiastically, her dark curls bouncing. "It's going to sail all the way to the end of the world and then come back with treasure. The best adventures always bring you back home," Christina agreed, brushing a gentle hand over her daughter's hair. Her fingers paused briefly at the small crescent-shaped birthmark behind Lily's right ear, identical to one she'd once traced on Terry's skin in the candlelight. Their small cottage hadn't changed much in 6 years. Christina had expanded her gallery, which now attracted serious collectors instead of just tourists. Her paintings, emotional seascapes, and abstract explorations of human connection had developed a following that allowed her and Lily to live comfortably. Not luxuriously, but with enough security that the envelope of cash Terry had left remained untouched. Sealed in a trust fund for Lily's education, Christina had discovered her pregnancy 8 weeks after Terry left. The initial shock had given way to a fierce determination that surprised even herself. She would raise this child alone. She would build a life worthy of the daughter growing inside her, and she would never again mistake passion for something deeper. Yet sometimes, during storms that battered their cottage, Christina found herself lighting candles and watching the rain, remembering a night when a stranger had seen parts of her soul she'd never revealed to anyone else. "Can we have pancakes?" Lily asked, drawing Christina back to the present. "Of course, my love. Let's make them together." As they mixed batter and flipped misshapen pancakes, Christina studied her daughter's profile. Lily had her eyes, but the determined set of her jaw, the thoughtful furrow that appeared between her brows when she concentrated, those belonged to Terry. As did the dimple that appeared in her left cheek when she smiled wide enough. Sometimes, Christina wondered what Terry would think of this extraordinary child they'd created. Would he be proud? Would he love her? Or would he have seen fatherhood as an inconvenience, an obligation? She told herself it didn't matter. They were complete. She and Lily, a family of 2 that needed nothing else. But on nights when Lily asked about her father, Christina couldn't bring herself to lie. "Your daddy didn't know about you, sweetheart. We spent one beautiful night together, and then our paths went different ways." "Like ships passing," Lily had said once, wise beyond her years. Yes, Christina had agreed, heart aching. Like ships passing in a storm. The envelope had been the worst part. Christina still remembered waking to find Terry gone, the morning after the storm, sparkling with renewed beauty that felt like mockery. The note had been painful enough, so brief, so formal after the intimacy they'd shared, but the money had been a knife to her heart, as if what had felt transcendent to her had been merely transactional to him, as if she was someone to compensate for services rendered. She'd almost thrown it into the sea. Instead, pragmatism had won out. She'd deposited it in a separate account, vowing never to spend a penny on herself. When Lily was born, Christina had transferred it all into a trust fund for her daughter's future. Terry's money would never touch Christina's life, but it would help secure Lily's. Now, watching her daughter devour strawberry-topped pancakes, Christina wondered if she'd been fair in her judgment. Maybe the money had simply been the only thing Terry had to give, an inadequate gesture from a man who didn't know how to offer more. "Mummy, can we go to the tide pools today?" Lily asked, strawberry juice staining her smile. "After your piano lesson," Christina promised. "Mrs. Wilson says I have good fingers for piano," Lily declared, wiggling her syrup-sticky digits. "She says they're long and graceful." Christina smiled, remembering Terry's elegant hands, how they had moved across her skin with such gentle precision. "You get those from your father," she said softly. Lily's eyes widened at this rare, freely offered detail. "Really? What else do I get from him?" Christina hesitated, then decided truth was the best gift she could give her daughter. "Your dimple. The way you furrow your brow when you're thinking hard. Your birthmark. Do you think he's out there somewhere, thinking about us?" Lily asked, her expression suddenly serious. Christina reached across the table to brush a dark curl from her daughter's forehead. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I know if he ever met you, he couldn't help but love you. Like you do." "No one could," ever love you exactly like I do, Christina said, throat tight with emotion. But in his own way, yes, I think he would. Lily seemed satisfied with this answer, returning to her pancakes with renewed vigor. Christina gazed out the window at the ocean, vast and unknowable. 6 years of silence stretched between that stormy night and this sunny morning, a gulf as wide as the sea itself. She had no way of knowing that far up the coast, a man was standing at another window, looking at the same ocean, holding a sketch of her cottage and wondering what might have been, or that fate, having once brought them together through a storm, was not yet finished with its work. Chapter 3. A Face from the Past. There was no logical reason for Terry to return to the coastal town. No business to conduct, no acquaintances to visit. Just an ache that had grown too persistent to ignore. A heartstring pulled taut over 6 years, drawing him back to where it had first been plucked. Spring had painted the cliffsides with wildflowers, so different from the storm-ravaged landscape of his memory. Terry drove slowly along the coastal road, his pulse quickening as familiar landmarks appeared. The curve where his car had broken down. The overlook that offered the first glimpse of the cottage. He parked in town, unable to bring himself to drive directly to Christina's door. What would he even say after 6 years of silence? I haven't forgotten you. I've dreamed of you. I've measured every connection since against what I felt with you for a single night. Instead, he wandered the small town square, noting changes, new shops, a renovated pier, the same salty breeze carrying laughter from a nearby playground. Children's voices drifted toward him, high and musical, against the backdrop of crashing waves. Terry paused, watching their carefree play from a distance. A girl with dark curls stood apart from the others, intent on building an elaborate sandcastle near the playground's edge. Something about her focused determination caught his attention. The serious set of her small shoulders, the careful precision of her movements. She looked up suddenly, as if feeling his gaze, and Terry's world tilted on its axis. The girl had sea-green eyes, Christina's eyes, set in a face that echoed his own childhood photographs. But it was what happened when she turned her head that stopped his breath entirely. A small, crescent-shaped birthmark, identical to his own, visible behind her right ear as she brushed back a wayward curl. Terry's legs nearly buckled beneath him. He gripped a nearby bench for support, mind racing with impossible calculations. 6 years. The timing would be right, but surely Christina would have contacted him unless she hadn't wanted him to know, unless she'd seen his money as the final statement on what their night had meant. "Lily, time to go, sweetheart." The voice sent a shock through Terry's system, a melody he'd carried in his memory, now made real again. Christina stood at the playground's edge, more beautiful than his memories had preserved. Her hair was shorter now, falling just below her shoulders, and there was a new confidence in her posture. But her smile, as the girl, Lily, ran toward her, remained exactly as he remembered, radiant, transformative. Terry couldn't move, couldn't breathe, as he watched Christina kneel to help Lily gather her toys. Their easy affection was palpable even from a distance. The casual way Lily leaned into her mother's embrace, the tender kiss Christina placed on her daughter's forehead. My daughter. The thought crashed through him with the force of a breaking wave. This child with Christina's eyes and his birthmark, this was his daughter. A daughter he'd never known existed. A daughter who had lived 5 years without him. Something primitive and powerful awakened in Terry's chest. A fierce, protective instinct he'd never experienced before. He took an involuntary step forward, then stopped himself. He couldn't simply approach them here, in public, couldn't upend their world without warning. Instead, he followed at a distance, watching as Christina and Lily walked hand in hand along the shore, stopping to examine shells and dip their toes in the foam-edged waves. Their easy laughter carried back to him on the breeze, each sound a reminder of all he had missed. They turned toward a familiar path, the one leading to the cliff-top cottage. Terry hung back, heart hammering against his ribs. Through the salt-tinged air, he could just make out their conversation. "Can we paint the sunset tonight, Mummy?" Lily asked, swinging their joined hands. "Of course," Christina answered. "What colors should we use?" "All of them," Lily declared with absolute conviction. "Sunsets need all the colors in the world." Christina laughed. That same rich, warm sound that had captivated Terry 6 years ago. "You're right. Sunsets are greedy that way." They disappeared up the winding path, leaving Terry rooted to the spot, overwhelmed by what he'd discovered. A daughter, his daughter. A child who loved art and built meticulous sandcastles and believed sunsets deserved every color imaginable. He returned to his car in a daze, sitting behind the wheel without starting the engine. Emotions crashed through him in relentless waves, joy at this newfound knowledge, grief for the years lost, anger that Christina hadn't told him, understanding of why she might have made that choice, and beneath it all, a deepening current of longing, not just for the Christina he'd known for one night, but for the family he glimpsed today, for the chance to know his daughter, for the possibility of becoming someone worthy of both of them. Terry rested his forehead against the steering wheel, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what lay before him. To walk away now would be to abandon his child twice, once in ignorance and once by choice. The thought was unbearable, but to stay meant confronting Christina, disrupting the life she'd built, risking rejection not just from her, but from the daughter who didn't know him, who might not want to know him. As dusk gathered around him, Terry made his decision. Tomorrow he would go to Christina's gallery. Tomorrow he would face the consequences of a storm-swept night 6 years ago, and all that had grown in the silence between then and now. Tomorrow he would meet his daughter. He started the car, the certainty of his decision calming the storm within him. 6 years ago, he had driven away from Christina's cottage, convinced their paths were meant to diverge. Now, watching the first stars appear over the ocean that had witnessed their beginning, Terry finally understood. Some journeys were circular by design, bringing you back to where you began, but with eyes better able to recognize what had been. There all along. Chapter 4. Confrontation and Truth. Morning light transformed Christina's gallery into a cathedral of color. Expanded from the modest space Terry remembered, it now featured high ceilings with skylights that bathed her paintings in natural illumination. Her work had evolved, deeper, more complex, emotion captured in each brushstroke with haunting precision. Terry moved slowly through the space, heart in his throat. Each canvas seemed to tell a fragment of a story he hadn't been present to witness. A series of storm paintings hung in the corner, furious seas beneath lightning-torn skies. He knew, without being told, that these were born from the night they'd shared. "We're not open for another hour." The voice behind him froze Terry in place. He turned slowly to face Christina, who stood in the doorway connecting the gallery to what must be her office. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. Then awareness dawned, and Terry watched a kaleidoscope of emotions cross her face. Shock, disbelief, wariness. "Terry," she whispered, the single word carrying 6 years of unspoken history. "Christina." His voice emerged rough-edged, betraying his emotional state. She took a half-step backward. "What are you doing here?" The practiced speech Terry had prepared dissolved under her gaze. Instead, raw honesty spilled from him. "I saw her yesterday, at the playground. I saw Lily." Christina's hand flew to her throat, her complexion paling. "You know." "She has my birthmark," Terry said simply. "And she's what? 5? 6? 5 and a half." Christina's voice was barely audible. "She's mine." It wasn't a question. Christina nodded once, her eyes never leaving his. "Yes." A heavy silence descended between them, years of unspoken words filling the space. Outside, waves crashed against the cliffs in an eternal rhythm that had witnessed their beginning and now their reunion. "Why didn't you tell me?" Terry finally asked, the question emerging more wounded than accusatory. Christina crossed her arms over her chest, a protective gesture. "Would it have mattered? You left money, Terry, like I was a—" She stopped herself. "You made it clear what that night meant to you." "No." Terry shook his head vehemently. "You've misunderstood completely. That night was the most real thing I'd experienced in years, maybe ever. Then why leave like that? Why leave money? Because I was a coward," he admitted. "Because what I felt terrified me. Because I convinced myself our worlds were too different." "And the money?" Terry closed his eyes briefly, ashamed. "I wanted to help. It was wrong. I see that now." "I never spent it," Christina said quietly. "Not a penny. It's in a trust fund for Lily's education." The revelation stunned Terry. For 6 years, he'd carried an image of Christina using his money to build her career. The reality that she'd rejected his financial help completely humbled him. "Does she know about me?" he asked, voice catching. "She knows her father exists, that he has her dimple and her birthmark, that we spent one night together during a storm and then our paths diverged." Christina's gaze was direct. "I've never lied to her. Thank you for that." Terry took a careful step closer. "I'd like to meet her. Properly." Christina tensed. "Why? What do you want from us, Terry?" "To know my daughter," he answered simply. "To be part of her life, if you'll allow it." "And then what? You'll drift in and out when it's convenient?" Her voice trembled slightly. "She's not an obligation. She's my child," Terry said, emotion making his voice rough. "Nothing about this is casual to me. I understand your skepticism. You have every right to it. But please, Christina, give me a chance to be her father." Christina studied him with those sea-green eyes that had haunted his dreams for 6 years. Whatever she saw in his face must have convinced her of his sincerity, because her posture softened slightly. "She has piano lessons on Thursdays," she said finally. "She'll be done at 4. Come to the cottage then." "But Terry," her eyes flashed with protective intensity, "if you're going to be in her life, it needs to be consistent. She deserves that much." "I know," Terry agreed, relief washing through him. "Thank you." Christina nodded once, then glanced toward the front door where a customer was peering in. "I need to open the gallery." Terry understood the dismissal. "I'll see you Thursday," he said, moving toward the exit. At the door, he paused. "Your work is extraordinary, Christina, even more beautiful than I remembered." Something flickered in her eyes, a brief softening, quickly controlled. "Thursday at 4, she repeated. "Don't be late." The cottage had changed little in 6 years. The same weathered exterior, the same wildflowers along the path, the same view of endless ocean, but evidence of the child who lived there was everywhere. Seashells arranged in careful patterns along the steps, wind chimes made of driftwood and sea glass tinkling in the breeze. Terry arrived exactly at 4, his heart pounding. When he knocked on the familiar door, Christina answered, her expression carefully neutral. "Come in," she said. "Lily's in the kitchen. I've told her someone special is visiting today." Terry followed her inside, overwhelmed by memories. Drawings covered the refrigerator, a small piano stood in the corner, and the scent of fresh-baked cookies filled the air. And then he saw her, his daughter, sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of milk and a half-eaten cookie, swinging her legs and humming to herself. In person, the resemblance was even more striking. His heart expanded painfully. "Lily," Christina said gently, "this is the friend I told you about." Lily looked up, curious but unafraid. Her sea-green eyes studied him with innocent intensity. "Hello," she said politely. "Hello, Lily," Terry managed, his voice thick with emotion. "It's very nice to meet you." "Are you my mommy's friend from the storm?" she asked directly. Terry glanced at Christina, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Yes," he answered. "I am." Lily's face brightened with interest. "Mommy painted lots of storm pictures. They're my favorite, even though they're a little scary." "I think the best art is a little scary," Terry said. "It makes you feel something powerful." Lily nodded solemnly, as if he'd said something profound. "Do you want a cookie? I helped make them." "I'd love one," Terry said, taking the seat Christina indicated. "They have chocolate chips and butterscotch chips," Lily informed him seriously. Christina moved around the kitchen, preparing tea, her movements tense despite her casual demeanor. Terry could feel her watchfulness hovering just beneath the surface. "Lily," Christina said gently, "there's something else about our visitor that's special." Lily looked at her mother curiously. "What?" Christina came to stand behind Lily's chair, placing gentle hands on her shoulders. "Remember how I told you that your daddy had to go away before he knew about you, and that he has the same birthmark as you?" Lily nodded, her expression growing serious. "Terry is your father, sweetheart." Lily's eyes widened, then darted to Terry's face, studying him with new intensity. "Really?" she whispered. Terry nodded, not trusting his voice. "Do you have the birthmark like mine?" Wordlessly, Terry turned his head and brushed back his hair to reveal the identical crescent behind his right ear. Lily slid from her chair and came around the table, examining the mark with solemn curiosity. Her small finger reached out tentatively, touching the birthmark with a gentleness that broke something open inside Terry's chest. "It's the same," she breathed, wonder filling her voice. "Yes," Terry managed. "We match." Lily looked back at her mother, then at Terry again, processing this revelation. Then she asked the question that mattered most. "Are you staying?" In the simple inquiry lay the fears and hopes of a child who'd grown up without a father. Terry met Christina's eyes over Lily's head, seeing both warning and fragile hope there. "I'd like to," he answered honestly. "If that's okay with you and your mom." "Not all the time," Christina clarified gently. "Terry lives in another city, but he wants to visit and get to know you." Lily considered this information, her small brow furrowing in an expression Terry recognized from his own mirror. Finally, she nodded decisively. "Okay," she said, "but you have to see my sandcastles first to make sure we can be friends." Despite the emotional weight of the moment, Terry found himself smiling. "That sounds like a fair arrangement." Lily returned to her cookie, seemingly satisfied, but her gaze kept returning to Terry with quiet wonder, as if memorizing his features and finding reflections of herself there. As afternoon light streamed through the windows, Terry felt a profound sense of rightness settle over him. The journey that had begun in storm and lightning had led here, to this moment, to this remarkable child with his birthmark and Christina's eyes. The road ahead would not be easy, but watching Lily enjoying her cookie while occasionally stealing glances at him, Terry knew with absolute certainty he was exactly where he belonged. Chapter 5. Building Bridges. Fatherhood came to Terry in small, precious moments that collected like seashells in his heart. The first time Lily reached for his hand while crossing the street, the way she tilted her head when considering a serious question exactly as he did. The pride in her voice when she announced to a stranger at the beach, "This is my dad. He has my same birthmark." 2 weeks had passed since their first meeting, and Terry had rearranged his entire life to remain in the coastal town. He'd taken a suite at the small oceanfront hotel, extending his stay indefinitely. His mornings began with calls and emails. His afternoons and evenings belonged to Lily, and by extension to Christina. Today, he sat cross-legged on the cottage floor, surrounded by art supplies, as Lily directed their collaborative masterpiece with the authority of a museum curator. "The sky needs more purple," she informed him seriously. "Stormy skies aren't just gray, Daddy. They have all the colors hiding in them." Daddy. The word still hit Terry like a wave each time she said it, which she had begun doing with increasing frequency, testing it out as if trying on a new and fascinating garment. "More purple it is," he agreed, reaching for the paint she indicated. "You have a good eye for color." "Mommy says I was born knowing things about art that she had to learn," Lily said, adding a swirl of deep blue to her side of the paper. "She says I have a gift." Terry glanced toward the kitchen where Christina moved about preparing dinner, her back to them. These past weeks had established a tentative peace between them, a careful choreography of co-parenting that maintained emotional distance while acknowledging their shared priority, Lily's happiness. "Your mother is very wise," Terry said, "and very talented. I've never seen paintings that capture feelings the way hers do." Lily nodded, accepting this as obvious truth. "She paints with her heart, not just her hands." She looked up suddenly, pinning Terry with those sea-green eyes so like Christina's. "Do you paint with your heart too?" Terry considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I'm trying to learn how," he answered honestly. "Your mom is a much better teacher than anyone I've ever had." From the kitchen, he caught the slight pause in Christina's movements, a momentary stillness that told him she'd heard. When she resumed chopping vegetables, her rhythm had softened. "You're doing okay for a beginner," Lily decided magnanimously, patting his hand. The gesture, so adult and yet so childlike, made his heart constrict with love. Later, after a dinner where conversation had flowed more easily than previous evenings, Terry helped Lily with her bath while Christina cleared the table. Another small milestone in their evolving arrangement. "Another bridge built. Will you read me a story?" Lily asked as he helped her into her pajamas, ones decorated with stars and moons that matched the celestial theme of her bedroom. "Of course," Terry said, his voice catching slightly. Each new fatherly duty granted to him felt like a gift. They settled on her bed, Lily immediately curling against his side as if she'd been doing so her entire life. The easy trust humbled him. He opened the book she'd selected, a tale about a lighthouse keeper and a lost whale, and began to read. Halfway through, a flash of lightning illuminated the room, followed by a distant rumble of thunder. Lily tensed against him. "I don't like storms," she whispered. "They're scary." Terry set the book aside, gently stroking her dark curls. "I used to think so too," he said. "But do you know when I stopped being afraid of them?" Lily shook her head, eyes wide. "The night I met your mother," he said softly. "There was a storm bigger than this one. My car broke down and I had to knock on her door for help." "That's the night from Mommy's paintings," Lily said with sudden understanding. "The night you made me." Terry smiled at her innocent way of putting it. "Yes, and that night I learned that sometimes the scariest storms can bring the most beautiful things into your life." Another flash of lightning, another rumble, closer this time. Lily flinched. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "That's okay," Terry assured her. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you face what scares you anyway." The bedroom door opened, and Christina appeared, her expression soft as she took in the scene. "I thought you might need some storm reinforcements," she said, coming to sit on Lily's other side. The three of them together on the small bed created a tableau that felt both new and somehow ancient, as if they'd always been meant to form this triangle of connection. "Daddy was telling me about the night you met," Lily said. "During the big storm." Something flickered in Christina's eyes as she met Terry's gaze over their daughter's head. A shared memory, electric and intimate. "It was a night I'll never forget," she said quietly, As the storm intensified outside, they created a sanctuary within. Christina fetched candles, just in case the power goes out, like it did that night. And Terry continued the story, with Christina occasionally adding her own embellishments that made Lily giggle despite the thunder. When Lily's eyelids finally grew heavy, they tucked her in together, their hands brushing as they pulled the blanket to her chin. The casual contact sent a jolt through Terry that reminded him forcefully of their first touch in the darkness 6 years ago. Christina felt it too. He could tell by the way her breath caught, the way her eyes darkened before she carefully withdrew. Her hand, "Sweet dreams, my love," she whispered to Lily, placing a kiss on her forehead. "Dream of sunny skies," Terry added, with his own gentle kiss. They left Lily's room together, closing the door softly behind them. In the hallway, illuminated by candlelight against the storm's darkness, they stood closer than they had since his return, close enough that Terry could detect the familiar scent of lavender in Christina's hair. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for letting me be part of her bedtime, for letting me be part of her life at all." Christina's gaze held his, unguarded for the first time in weeks. "She adores you," she said simply. "You're good with her in ways I didn't expect." "She makes it easy," Terry admitted. "She's extraordinary, Christina. You've done an amazing job raising her." Pride and something deeper shone in Christina's eyes. "She has your heart," she said softly. "Your compassion. I see it in how gentle she is with wounded things. Birds with broken wings, abandoned kittens, classmates who are sad. That didn't come from me." The acknowledgement that he had contributed something valuable to their daughter besides his physical features touched Terry deeply. "I missed so much," he said, regret coloring his voice. "Her first steps, her first words." "She took her first steps toward one of my storm paintings," Christina offered unexpectedly, "as if she knew somehow that you were in it." The revelation hung between them, weighted with significance neither was ready to fully acknowledge. Lightning flashed again, thunder directly overhead now. The cottage lights flickered once, twice, and died, plunging them into darkness save for the candles Christina had presciently lit. "Just like that night," Terry murmured, the parallel impossible to ignore. Christina nodded, her face transformed by candlelight into the memory he'd carried for 6 years. For a suspended moment, the present dissolved, and they were strangers. Again, meeting in a storm, discovering each other for the first time. Then Lily's frightened cry from the bedroom broke the spell. "Mommy, Daddy!" They moved in perfect unison, parental instinct overriding everything else. Lily sat upright in bed, tears streaming down her face as the storm raged outside her window. "It's okay, sweetheart," Christina soothed, sitting on one side of the bed. "We're right here," Terry assured her, taking the other side. Lily reached for both their hands, creating a circle of connection. "Can you stay?" she asked in a small voice. "Both of you, until the storm goes away?" Christina and Terry exchanged glances over their daughter's head, a silent communication of parental agreement. "Of course," Christina said, stretching out on the small bed. "We're not going anywhere," Terry promised, doing the same. Lily settled between them, holding both their hands across her small body. Gradually, her breathing slowed and deepened as she drifted back to sleep, secure between her parents. In the candlelit darkness, Terry found Christina watching him, her expression unreadable. "This isn't how I imagined our lives would be," she whispered, careful not to wake Lily. "Is it better or worse than you imagined?" Terry asked, equally quiet. Christina's gaze softened as she looked down at their sleeping daughter. "Different," she finally said, "complicated. But when I see how she lights up around you, I can't regret any path that brought us here." Outside, the storm began to recede, thunder growing more distant. Inside, something shifted subtly between them. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. A bridge, fragile but real, spanning the chasm of 6 silent years. Terry watched as Christina's own eyes grew heavy, her hand still linked with Lily's, which remained linked with his. 3 hearts connected by blood and circumstance and, perhaps, by something deeper still. As Christina drifted into sleep, her face softened into the expression he remembered from that morning 6 years ago. Vulnerable, peaceful, hauntingly beautiful. Terry remained awake, memorizing this tableau he had never dared to dream possible, his daughter and her mother, sleeping beside him in the gentle aftermath of a storm. Outside, the clouds parted to reveal a crescent moon, shaped exactly like the birthmark he shared with his daughter. Terry smiled at the symmetry of it all. Perhaps some patterns were written in the stars long before we recognized them on Earth. Chapter 6. Hidden Shadows. Christina had always been skilled at hiding pain. As a child with an alcoholic father, she'd learned to mask bruises with long sleeves and heartache with bright smiles. As a struggling artist, she'd concealed financial worry behind confident brushstrokes. As a single mother, she'd buried loneliness beneath the joy of raising Lily. The occasional headaches had been easy to dismiss at first, blamed on changing weather, stress, or simply fatigue from balancing motherhood with her career. But in recent weeks, they had transformed into something more sinister. Vicious, debilitating attacks that left her vision blurred and her hands trembling. Just a migraine, she told Mrs. Wilson when she had to reschedule Lily's piano lesson. Too much time in the sun, she explained to the gallery assistant, who found her leaning against a wall, eyes squeezed shut against the pane. A touch of summer flu, she assured Terry when he noticed her pallor at Lily's weekend dance recital. But in the privacy of her bathroom, Christina confronted a fear she couldn't artfully conceal. The nosebleeds had started 2 weeks ago, sudden, copious, terrifying, and the exhaustion that dragged at her limbs felt nothing like normal fatigue. It could be nothing, Dr. Evans had said at her discreet appointment in the next town over. But with your family history, we should run tests. Now, alone in her cottage studio, while Lily spent the afternoon with Terry at the tide pools, Christina stared at the closed envelope on her desk. Test results, answers she both needed and dreaded. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and unfolded the papers inside. The medical terminology blurred before her eyes, but certain phrases stood out with terrible clarity. Abnormal cell. Growth. Requires immediate attention, treatment options. The paper slipped from her fingers, drifting to the floor like a fallen leaf. Outside, sunlight danced on ocean waves with mocking brilliance. Inside, shadows gathered in Christina's heart as she confronted a truth too heavy to carry alone. And this one is a sea anemone, Lily explained, pointing to a swaying crimson creature in the tide pool. They look like flowers, but they're actually animals. They can sting you, but only a little bit. Terry crouched beside his daughter, marveling at her confident knowledge of marine life. How did you get so smart about ocean creatures? Lily shrugged, the movement charmingly reminiscent of her mother. Mommy and I come here a lot. She says, the ocean is the best teacher because it's always changing but always the same. Your mother is very wise, Terry said, a smile warming his voice. That's what you always say, Lily observed, peering at a hermit crab scuttling across the tide pool. Floor, do you think Mommy is pretty too? The question caught Terry off guard. Yes, he answered honestly. I think your mother is very beautiful. Lily nodded, satisfied. I heard Mrs. Wilson tell her friend that you look at Mommy the way princes look. At princesses in my storybooks. Do you want to marry her? Terry nearly lost his balance, catching himself on the rocky edge of the tide pool. In the month since he'd returned to the coastal town, he and Christina had established a careful friendship focused entirely on Lily. The attraction between them remained unacknowledged, a current running beneath their interactions, powerful but untouched. "It's complicated, sweetheart," he finally managed. "That's what grown-ups say when they don't know the answer," Lily informed him sagely. As afternoon stretched toward evening, they headed back to the cottage. Lily skipped ahead, singing a made-up song about starfish, while Terry followed with their collection of shells and sea glass. The cottage came into view, golden in the late afternoon light. Through the kitchen window, Terry could see Christina moving about, preparing dinner. Something about her posture, a subtle slump to her normally straight shoulders, triggered an alarm in his mind. When she pressed a hand to her temple, then steadied herself against the counter, his concern deepened. It wasn't the first time. He'd noticed signs of strain, but she'd dismissed his previous inquiries with casual explanations. Lily burst through the door ahead of him, announcing their return with characteristic enthusiasm. "Mommy, we found the coolest hermit crab, and Daddy helped me build a sandcastle with 5 towers." Christina turned, her smile blooming at the sight of their daughter. But Terry caught the effort behind that smile, the slight tension around her eyes, the unnatural pallor beneath her tan. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," Christina said, kneeling to admire Lily's bucket of treasures. "Why don't you sort these on the porch table while I finish making dinner?" "Okay," Lily agreed easily, taking her bucket outside to the porch. Alone, with Christina in the kitchen, Terry studied her more carefully. "Are you feeling all right?" "Just tired," she replied, turning back to the vegetables she was chopping. "It's been a busy week at the gallery." Terry moved closer, drawn by an instinct he couldn't define. "Christina," something in his tone made her pause, knife hovering above a half-cut tomato. She didn't turn. "Please don't," she whispered. "I can't handle your concern right now." Before Terry could respond, she set down the knife and headed toward the hallway. "I need to get something from my studio. Can you watch the sauce?" As Christina disappeared down the hall, Terry automatically stirred the fragrant pasta sauce while his thoughts churned. Through the window, he could see Lily on the porch, utterly absorbed in organizing her beach treasures. On the counter, Christina's phone lit up with a notification, a reminder for an appointment with Dr. Evans tomorrow afternoon. When 10 minutes passed with no sign of her return, Terry went to her studio. The door was ajar, soft lamplight spilling into the corridor. He knocked gently. "Christina, the sauce is starting to bubble." No response. Terry pushed the door open further. Christina sat at her desk, back to him, shoulders curved inward as if bearing an invisible weight. Papers were scattered before her. "Christina," he said again, softer. She didn't turn, but her voice when it came was raw with suppressed emotion. "You should take Lily for ice cream after dinner. There's that place on the boardwalk she loves." Terry stepped into the room. "What's going on?" "Please, Terry, I need some time alone tonight." He moved closer, now able to see her profile, the sheen of tears on her cheek that she quickly brushed away. On the desk before her lay papers with a medical letterhead. Terry's heart constricted. "You're ill," he said quietly. Not a question. Christina's shoulders stiffened, then slumped in defeat. "It might be nothing," she said, echoing words clearly told to her. "They need to run more tests." Terry knelt beside her chair, turning it gently so she faced him. The vulnerability in her eyes struck him like a physical blow. "What kind of tests?" he asked, keeping his voice steady despite the fear unfurling in his chest. Christina looked away. "The kind that determine how much time you have to teach your 5-year-old everything she might need to know without you." The words fell between them like stones. Terry's hand found hers, gripping it tightly. "Look at me," he urged gently. When she finally met his gaze, the raw fear in her eyes mirrored his own. "Whatever this is," Terry said, his voice rough with emotion, "you're not facing it alone, not anymore. You don't understand, Christina whispered. I can't put this on you. You just found Lily. You're building a relationship with her. I won't make you take on my... Stop, Terry interrupted firmly. This isn't about obligation, Christina. This is about us, all three of us. A tear slipped down Christina's cheek. There is no us, Terry. There's you and me co-parenting Lily. That's the arrangement. Is that really all you think we are? Terry asked quietly. Before she could answer, Lily called from the kitchen. Mommy, Daddy, the sauce is making big bubbles. Reality intruded, reminding them of responsibilities that couldn't be set aside. Even in moments of crisis, Christina wiped her eyes, visibly gathering her composure. We should go, she said, standing. She'll wonder what's wrong. Terry remained kneeling, still holding her hand. Promise me you won't shut me out of this. Whatever the tests show, whatever happens next, promise me. Christina looked down at their joined hands. I can't be your burden, Terry. You're not a burden, he said fiercely. You're Lily's mother. He stopped, words failing him. Mommy, Lily called again, more insistently. Coming, sweetheart. Christina called back, her voice impressively normal. To Terry, she said quietly, we'll talk later, after she's in bed. Terry reluctantly released her hand. As he watched her switch seamlessly into mother mode, expertly handling both the bubbling sauce and Lily's excited chatter about sandcastles, Terry made a silent vow. Whatever shadows loomed in Christina's future, in their future, she would not face them alone. Not this time. Not ever again. The community festival had transformed the small town square into a wonderland of lights, music, and laughter. Paper lanterns swayed in the gentle evening breeze. Local musicians played on a makeshift stage, and the scent of caramel apples and roasted corn filled the air. Can I ride the carousel again, please? Lily begged, her eyes bright with excitement. Christina smiled, grateful for her daughter's joy. The past week since receiving the test results had been a blur of follow-up appointments scheduled discreetly. In the next town, out of reach of local gossip, only Terry knew, a confidence she'd reluctantly shared after his discovery in her studio. One more ride, she agreed, and then we should head home. Daddy, will you ride with me? Lily asked, turning to Terry with unquestioning confidence. Wild horses couldn't stop me, Terry assured her, taking her small hand. Christina watched them walk toward the antique carousel, Lily skipping beside her father's longer stride. Their matching profiles created a portrait that squeezed her heart. What she had always wanted for her daughter, what she now feared Lily might lose too soon. She touched her temple, where a dull ache had been building throughout the evening. The headaches were becoming more frequent, more difficult to hide. The specialist she'd seen yesterday had spoken of treatment options, survival rates, quality of life, clinical terms that failed to capture the terror of potentially leaving. Her child motherless, Christina closed her eyes briefly against a wave of dizziness. When she opened them, the festival lights seemed too bright, the music too loud. She took a deep breath, willing the sensation to pass. From the carousel, Terry glanced back, immediately noticing her distress. He frowned, concern evident even, as he helped Lily onto a painted horse. Christina forced a smile and waved, silently assuring him she was fine, but she wasn't fine. The dizziness was intensifying, the ground seeming to tilt beneath her feet. Christina reached for a nearby bench, desperate for support, but her hand found only empty air as darkness began to encroach on her vision. The last thing she saw was Terry leaping from the just-starting carousel, his face transformed by fear as he sprinted toward her. The last thing she felt was the strange sensation of falling without impact, then nothing. Beeping machines and the antiseptic smell of hospital disinfectant greeted Christina as consciousness returned. She blinked against harsh fluorescent lighting, momentarily disoriented. Hey, you're back. Terry's voice, gentle with relief, drew her focus. He sat beside her bed, his face lined with worry, his hand wrapped around hers. Beyond him, through a window in the hospital room door, Christina could see Lily curled asleep on a waiting room chair, watched over by Mrs. Wilson. "What happened?" Christina asked, her voice raspy. "You collapsed at the festival," Terry explained, helping her take a sip of water. "You've been unconscious for about an hour." Memory returned in fragments. "Lily?" "She's okay." Scared, but okay. Christina closed, her eyes briefly, relief washing through her. "Why didn't you tell me how bad it was getting?" Terry asked, his voice thick with emotion. "The doctor said you've been having symptoms for weeks, maybe months." "I was going to tell you," Christina interrupted weakly. "After the festival. I didn't want to ruin Lily's night." Terry's hand tightened around hers. "You can't do this alone, Christina. You can't protect everyone all the time, especially not at the cost of your own health." Tears welled in Christina's eyes. "I've always handled things alone. It's what I do." "Not anymore," Terry said with quiet intensity. "I'm here now. I want to help. Not out of obligation or guilt, but because I care about you deeply." Christina turned her face away, overwhelmed by the sincerity in his eyes. "You can't say things like that, not now, not when I'm facing this." "That's exactly why I'm saying it," Terry countered gently. "Do you know what went through my mind when I saw you collapse? That I might lose you before I ever got the chance to tell you how I feel." A tear slipped down Christina's cheek as the doctor entered with her test results. Terry straightened, but didn't release her hand. "Ms. Jackson," the doctor greeted her. "I've reviewed your records from Dr. Evans, and we've done some additional testing while you were unconscious." Christina tensed. "And the tumor is operable. The concerning news is that we shouldn't wait. The increasing frequency of your symptoms indicates it's growing more rapidly than initially estimated." "How soon?" Christina asked quietly. "I'd like to schedule surgery for next week," Dr. Reynolds answered. "The sooner we address this, the better your prognosis." Christina closed her eyes, absorbing the reality of her situation. Surgery, recovery, treatment, all while trying to maintain normalcy. "For Lily, I'll need to make arrangements for Lily," she began, mind racing through logistics. "Christina," Terry interrupted gently. "Stop, one thing at a time." He turned to the doctor. "Will she need care at home after the surgery?" Dr. Reynolds nodded. "Absolutely, for at least a few weeks. She'll have it," Terry said firmly. "Whatever she needs." Christina started to protest, but Terry squeezed her hand, silencing her. "For once in your life," he said quietly, "let someone else be strong for you." Looking into his eyes, Christina saw not pity, not obligation, but something she'd never expected to find again. Love, steady and unwavering. In that sterile hospital room, with machines beeping and uncertainty looming, Christina finally allowed the walls around her heart to crumble. She had spent so long being strong, for herself, for Lily, for the life they'd built together. Perhaps Terry was right. Perhaps true strength sometimes meant allowing yourself to be vulnerable. "Okay," she whispered, the single word carrying the weight of surrender, of trust. Outside in the waiting room, Lily stirred in her sleep, as if somehow sensing the profound shift that had just occurred between her parents. A shifting of burdens, a sharing of shadows, a tentative step toward a future none of them could clearly see, but that suddenly they would face together. Chapter 7. The First Twist. Vulnerability and Strength. The scent of antiseptic couldn't mask the fragrance of the wildflowers Terry had brought. They brightened Christina's hospital room with defiant color against the sterile whites and grays, much as Christina herself had brightened Terry's life, he reflected, watching her sleep in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through the window. 3. Days had passed since her surgery. 3 days of hovering between fear and hope, of whispered consultations with doctors, of trying to explain to Lily in gentle terms why Mommy needed to stay in the hospital. 3 days of Terry discovering reservoirs of strength he hadn't known he possessed. Christina stirred, her eyelashes fluttering against pale cheeks. The bandages wrapped around her head made her seem both vulnerable and brave. A warrior who had faced an invisible enemy and survived the first battle. "Hey," Terry said softly as her eyes opened. "Welcome back." Christina's smile was slight but genuine. "You're still here." "Where else would I be?" His hand found hers atop the hospital blanket, their fingers intertwining with comfortable familiarity. In the crucible of crisis, their relationship had transformed, old barriers melting away before the heat of shared fear and shared hope. "Lily?" Christina asked, the single word carrying all her maternal concern. "She's with Mrs. Wilson for the afternoon. They're baking cookies for you." Terry brushed a strand of hair from Christina's forehead, careful to avoid the bandages. She decorated a get-well card that's bigger than she is. It has approximately a pound of glitter on it. Christina's laugh was soft but real. The most beautiful sound Terry had heard in days. "I'll be finding glitter in my cottage until she graduates college." "Probably," Terry agreed, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand. "The doctor was in earlier. He says your initial response to the surgery is excellent, better than they expected." Relief softened Christina's features. "When can I go home?" "Another 2 days, if everything continues this way." Terry hesitated, then added what they'd both been avoiding. "But there's still the follow-up treatment to discuss." Christina's gaze drifted to the window, where the ocean was visible in the distance. A blue line separating Earth from sky. "I know. I've been looking into specialists," Terry said carefully. "There's a treatment center in Boston with remarkable success rates for cases like yours. I've spoken with the director there." Christina turned back to him, a familiar, stubborn light in her sea-green eyes. "Terry, I can't just uproot Lily to move to Boston. Her whole life is here. Her school, her friends, the cottage." "Not permanently," Terry clarified. "Just for the duration of the treatment. 3 months, maybe 4. He squeezed her hand gently. "I found a place we could stay, walking distance from the center. It has a little garden Lily would love." Christina's expression shifted as she processed his words. "We?" The vulnerability in that single question nearly undid Terry. "Yes, we," he confirmed softly. "All 3 of us. If you'll let me, I want to be there through all of it. You have your own life, Terry. Your work. My life is with you and Lily now." He interrupted gently. "Everything else is just details. Arrangements that can be made." Tears gathered in Christina's eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you put your life on hold for this, for me?" Terry studied their joined hands, her artist's fingers entwined with his. "Do you remember that night during the storm, when you asked me to tell you something real, something I wouldn't normally tell a stranger?" Christina nodded slightly, her eyes never leaving his face. "I told you I was afraid I'd built my life around things that didn't actually matter," Terry continued. "That was the most honest I'd been with anyone in years, maybe ever." He met her gaze directly. 6 years later, I finally understand what does matter. Who matters? You and Lily. You're what matters, Christina. Everything else is secondary." A tear slipped down Christina's cheek. Terry caught it with a gentle finger. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Not just of the treatment or the pain. I'm scared of needing someone, of letting myself depend on you, only to find myself alone again when things get hard." The raw honesty of her confession struck Terry like a physical blow. In those few words lay the heart of Christina's resistance. Not pride, but fear. Fear born of abandonment, of learning too young that those you love could disappear when you needed them most. "I understand why you'd feel that way," Terry said, voice rough with emotion. "I left once, but Christina, I'm not that man anymore. These past weeks with you and Lily, they've changed me, shown me what I want, what I need." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I'm not going anywhere. Not now, not ever again, unless you tell me to go." Christina studied his face, searching for any hint of insincerity. Finding none, she closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering courage. "I need to show you something," she said. "When I go home, something I've never shown anyone." Before Terry could ask what she meant, a nurse entered to check Christina's vital signs. The moment of intimate confession passed, but something had shifted between them. A deeper trust established, a promise made and received. 2 days later, Christina returned home to a cottage exploding with welcome home decorations. Lily had transformed the living room with handmade paper chains, lopsided paper flowers, and a banner reading "Get Better Mommy" in wobbly, glitter-encrusted letters. "Do you like it?" Lily asked anxiously as Terry helped Christina to the couch. "I made everything myself." "Well, Mrs. Wilson helped with the scissors for the hard parts." "It's the most beautiful decoration I've ever seen," Christina assured her, opening her arms for a careful hug. "Thank you, my sweet girl." Terry watched them embrace, his heart full. During Christina's hospital stay, he had moved temporarily into the cottage's small guest room, a practical arrangement to care for Lily, but one that felt increasingly like coming home each night. After a celebratory dinner of Christina's favorite foods, prepared by Terry with Lily's enthusiastic help, and a longer-than-usual bedtime routine in which Lily needed multiple reassurances that Mommy wasn't going back to the hospital, quiet finally settled over the cottage. Terry found Christina in her studio, standing before a covered canvas propped against the wall. "Is this what you wanted to show me?" he asked softly, not wanting to startle her. Christina turned, her expression vulnerable yet determined beneath the small bandage that remained on her temple. "Yes, and these." She gestured to a stack of canvases leaning against the far wall, at least a dozen paintings hidden from view. With careful movements, still mindful of her healing body, she began turning them to face the room, one by one. Terry's breath caught as the images were revealed. Each canvas captured a moment from their night together 6 years ago, the storm raging outside the cottage windows, candlelight casting shadows across bare skin, the ocean at dawn as seen from her bedroom window. Not explicit, but undeniably intimate, paintings born of memory and emotion rather than mere physical recollection. "You painted our night," he said softly, moved beyond words by the revelation that she had carried those hours with her, transforming them into art. "I couldn't stop," Christina admitted, her voice low. "After you left, after I discovered I was pregnant, even after Lily was born, these images kept rising in me, demanding to be expressed." She touched one canvas lightly, a rendering of 2 hands meeting in darkness. "I never showed them to anyone, never sold them. They were too personal, too sacred." Terry finished for her, understanding completely. Christina nodded, then moved to the covered canvas he'd first noticed. "This is the most recent one. I finished it the week before you came back." With trembling fingers, she pulled away the cloth. The painting nearly brought Terry to his knees. It showed the cottage interior during a storm, clearly their storm, but with a crucial difference. In this version, 2 adults sat on either side of a small child with dark curls, reading a book by candlelight. The family that might have been rendered with such longing that it emanated from the canvas like physical heat. "Christina," Terry breathed, unable to find adequate words. "I painted what I couldn't allow myself to want," she whispered. "A dream I thought was impossible." Terry moved to her then, drawn by a force beyond conscious thought. His hands framed her face with infinite tenderness, mindful of her healing wound. "It's not impossible," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "It's right here, waiting for us to claim it." When their lips met, it was gentle at first, an acknowledgement of Christina's physical fragility, of the delicate moment between them. But as her arms wrapped around his waist, the kiss deepened, 6 years of separation and weeks of renewed connection pouring into this single point of contact. They parted breathless, foreheads touching, sharing the same air. "I was so angry when you left," Christina confessed. "When I found your money, it felt like you were paying me for the night, like what we'd shared meant nothing." "That was never my intention," Terry said, pain evident in his voice. "I thought I was helping in my clumsy way. I didn't know how to process what had happened between us, how profound it felt after just one night. It scared me, so I ran." His thumb gently traced her cheekbone. "It was the biggest mistake of my life." Christina's eyes searched his. "And now?" "What happens now, Terry? I'm facing months of treatment. I'm not the carefree woman you met that night. I come with complications, with fears, with a child who needs stability." "Now," Terry said, drawing her closer, "we face whatever comes together. The treatment in Boston, the recovery afterward, building a life that includes all three of us." He smiled softly. "And don't you understand yet? Lily isn't a complication. She's the miracle that connected us again. As for your fears, your struggles, they're in part of loving you, Christina. All of you, not just the easy parts." "And when I'm weak from treatment," she challenged, needing to hear the answer. "When I'm not the strong, independent woman you admire?" Terry's expression grew serious. "When I was young, my grandfather told me something I never understood until now. He said true strength isn't never needing help. It's having the courage to accept it when offered with love." His hands slid down to take both of hers. "Let me be strong for you when you can't be. Let me help carry this burden. Not because you're weak, but because sharing it, that's what love is." Love. The word hung between them, unspoken directly, yet present in every syllable, every touch, every look. Christina's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow this time, but of a tentative hope she'd long denied herself. "I'm terrified," she admitted in a whisper. "Not just of being sick, but of letting you in completely, of trusting this is real." "I know," Terry acknowledged. "Trust takes time." "But Christina..." He touched the small bandage at her temple with infinite care. "We've wasted 6 years already. Let's not waste whatever time we have left, whether it's 6 more decades or 6 more days." The raw honesty of his words, acknowledging the uncertain future her diagnosis presented without flinching from it, broke through Christina's final defenses. She leaned into him, allowing herself to be held, to be supported, to be loved. Outside, rain began to fall. Not the violent storm of their first meeting, but a gentle, cleansing shower that whispered of renewal, of growth, of life continuing despite all odds. Inside the small studio, surrounded by paintings born of longing, 2 people who had found each other once by chance and once again by fate began the delicate, courageous work of building a future neither had dared to imagine possible, one moment, one truth, one shared breath at a time. Chapter 8. Reconnection. Summer surrendered to autumn as Christina's strength gradually returned. The Boston Treatment Center had confirmed what Terry's research suggested. Her prognosis was cautiously optimistic with the right therapeutic approach. Another month of local treatments, then the move to Boston for more intensive care. But today, those concerns seemed distant as October sunlight gilded the coastal landscape. Terry had surprised Christina and Lily with a picnic on a secluded stretch of beach, accessible only by a winding path through pine trees that Lily declared magical. Her energy, boundless as ever, had her darting back and forth between tide pools, while Terry and Christina sat on a blanket, watching her with shared affection. "She hasn't stopped talking about the sailing trip you promised her," Christina said, smiling, as Lily attempted to coax a hermit crab from its shell. "It's all I heard. About at breakfast this morning. The doctor said your balance has improved enough," Terry replied. "And I found the perfect boat to rent, small but stable, perfect for a family outing." Family. The word settled between them, comfortable now, where once it might have caused Christina to tense. The past weeks had seen a gradual transformation in their relationship. Cautious at first, then increasingly confident, Terry had proven his commitment not with grand gestures, but with consistent presence, helping Lily with homework, taking over when Christina needed rest, learning to navigate the complexities of their evolving dynamic with patience and humor. "I used to dream about sailing," Christina admitted, leaning back on her elbows to face the sun. "That night, when we talked for hours before everything else. I told you about wanting to paint from the water, to see the coast from a different perspective." Terry nodded, memory lighting his eyes. "You said you wanted to experience how small humans really are against the vastness of the ocean, that it would be humbling in the best possible way." "You remembered," Christina said softly, touched by this evidence that their conversations, not just their physical connection, had stayed with him. "I remember everything about that night," Terry said simply. He reached across the blanket, brushing a strand of hair from her face, a casual intimacy they'd gradually reclaimed. "Your laugh when I accidentally knocked over my wine glass, the way you tilted your head when considering a serious question, how you looked in candlelight." Heat bloomed in Christina's cheeks that had nothing to do with the autumn sun. Since her surgery, their physical relationship had remained in careful suspension, tender but restrained, both acutely aware of her healing body and the emotional complexities still being navigated. "Mommy, Daddy, come quick!" Lily's excited voice broke the moment. "I found a starfish, a purple one." They rose together, hands automatically finding each other as they crossed the sand to where Lily crouched by a tide pool, her expression reverent as she pointed to the violet-hued creature clinging to a rock. "Isn't it the most beautiful thing ever?" she whispered. Terry knelt beside her, his expression serious. "It's definitely in the top 3 most beautiful things I've ever seen." "What are the other 2? Lily asked, curiosity piqued. Terry glanced up at Christina, his eyes holding hers with unmistakable meaning. "Well, there's your mother," he said softly. "And you." Lily giggled delightedly at being included in this list, while Christina felt something shift and settle in her chest. A piece of her heart she hadn't realized was still dislocated, finding its proper place. Later, as afternoon edged toward evening, they returned to the cottage, laden with shells, sea glass, and various treasures Lily had deemed essential to her collection. While Christina helped Lily sort and classify her findings, Terry disappeared into the kitchen, emerging an hour later to announce dinner was ready. "You cooked?" Christina asked, surprised. "I've been practicing," Terry admitted with a slightly sheepish smile. "Mrs. Wilson has been giving me lessons while you were at therapy." The dining table had been transformed with candles and autumn flowers. The meal itself was simple but prepared with obvious care. Grilled fish with herbs, roasted vegetables, crusty bread still warm from the oven. "You made all my favorites," Christina observed, touched by the thoughtfulness. "Mine too," Lily exclaimed, already reaching for a piece of bread. Dinner passed in easy conversation and laughter, a tableau of domestic happiness that would have seemed impossible months earlier. Lily regaled them with elaborate plans for Halloween costumes, while Terry and Christina exchanged glances over her head, sharing silent amusement at their daughter's creative vision. After helping with dishes, Lily insisting on drying the not-breakable Her things. Terry supervised bath time, while Christina retreated to the porch with a cup of tea, savoring the tranquility of the October evening. Stars were beginning to appear above the ocean, pinpricks of silver against deepening blue. The screen door opened behind her. "She wants both of us for bedtime stories," Terry said. "Apparently, tonight's selection requires different voices for all the characters." Christina smiled, setting aside her tea. "We'd better not disappoint." Then, working together to bring Lily's storybook to life had become a cherished ritual. Terry providing dramatic voices for dragons and wizards, Christina handling the gentler characters with expressive nuance that reflected her artistic soul. Lily, snuggled between them in her small bed, watched with wide-eyed delight as the tale unfolded. "And they lived happily ever after," Christina concluded softly, closing the book. "Do you think that's really possible?" Lily asked sleepily. "Happily ever after." Christina and Terry exchanged glances over their daughter's head, a world of meaning in the silent communication. "I think," Terry said carefully, "that happiness isn't about everything being perfect all the time. It's about finding people who make even the hard parts of life better because you're together." Lily considered this with drowsy seriousness. "Like when I was scared of the thunder, but then you both stayed with me, and it wasn't scary anymore." "Exactly. Like that?" Christina confirmed, her voice thick with emotion as she smoothed Lily's dark curls. "Then I think we're already having our happily ever after," Lily declared, with a child's simple wisdom, before yawning hugely. After kisses goodnight and promises of sailing tomorrow if the weather held, they quietly left Lily's room. In the hallway, Terry reached for Christina's hand, his touch sending warmth spreading through her. "Sailing tomorrow," he said softly. "Weather permitting." "Weather permitting," Christina agreed, allowing him to lead her onto the moonlit porch. The night air carried the scent of salt and pine, crisp with autumn's edge. Stars reflected in the distant ocean, creating the illusion that the boundary between sky and sea had dissolved completely. Terry turned to her, his expression illuminated by the porch's soft light. "I've been thinking about what Lily said. About happily ever after." Christina's heart quickened. "What about it?" "She's right, you know. Happiness isn't an end point. It's found in moments like today, like this." His hand gently cupped her cheek. "I keep thinking about all the moments we lost, Christina, all the years we could have had together." "We can't go back," she said softly. "We can only go forward." "That's what I want to talk about," Terry said, his voice deepening with emotion. "Going forward, together." Before he could continue, a distant rumble of thunder interrupted the night's stillness, a storm approaching from across the water. Christina smiled at the familiar sound, no longer carrying fear, but rather a reminder of beginnings. "Perhaps we should continue this inside," she suggested, as the first raindrops began to fall. They retreated to the living room just as the shower intensified into a proper autumn storm. Terry built a fire in the small hearth while Christina lit candles, not from necessity this time, but from a shared appreciation for their gentle light. "I have something for you," Terry said when they were settled on the sofa, the fire casting dancing shadows across the room. From his pocket, he withdrew a small weathered sketchbook. Christina recognized it as one she'd seen him carrying occasionally, but had never examined. "What is this?" she asked, accepting it with curious hands. "Open it," Terry encouraged softly. Christina turned the first page and felt her breath catch. There, rendered in careful pencil strokes, was her cottage, viewed from the cliff path exactly as it would have appeared the night of the storm 6 years ago. The next page showed the interior by candlelight, then her gallery as it had been, the beach, the tide pools, each drawing dated, spanning the 6 years of their separation. "I don't understand," Christina whispered, turning pages with trembling fingers. You drew these before you came back? Terry nodded, his expression vulnerable in the firelight. After I left, I couldn't stop thinking about this place, about you. I started drawing from memory, afraid I'd forget the details. It became a habit, almost a compulsion. Every few months, another sketch. But you never came back. Not until fate intervened, Terry finished. I convinced myself you'd moved on, that what we'd shared, intense as it was, had been just one night to you. He took her hand, his touch gentle but fervent. I was a coward, Christina, too afraid of rejection to risk finding out the truth. Christina stared at the final sketch, dated just weeks before his return. It showed her cottage at sunset, light spilling from the windows in a way that suggested warmth and life within. You carried us with you, she said wonderingly. All that time. In the only way I knew how, Terry admitted. He reached to turn one more page, blank until now, and withdrew a small velvet pouch from his pocket. There's one more illustration I want to add, but I need your help with it. Christina's heart thundered in her chest as Terry opened the pouch, tipping its contents into his palm, a ring of delicate silver set with a small blue-green stone that matched her eyes exactly. This isn't a proper proposal, he said quickly, seeing her expression. Not yet. I know we're still finding our way, still healing old wounds and facing new challenges. He held the ring between them, a tangible question. Think of it as a promise that whenever you're ready, a month from now or a year or 5 years, I'll be here, loving you, loving our daughter, building whatever future we can create together. Tears filled Christina's eyes, spilling onto her cheeks unchecked. Terry, you don't have to answer now, he assured her. I just wanted you to know that while we're in Boston, while you're fighting this battle, this is what I'm holding on to. This possibility, this hope. Christina closed her eyes briefly, overwhelmed by the confluence of emotion, fear of her uncertain health, joy at what Terry offered, lingering ghosts of past hurt, and blazing hope for what might be possible. When she opened them again, decision had crystallized in her heart. She held out her left hand. I don't want to wait, she said softly. None of us knows how much time we have. My diagnosis made that painfully clear. But I know I want to spend whatever time I have with you. Thunder rolled outside as Terry slipped the ring onto her finger, nature providing dramatic accompaniment to the moment as it had to their first meeting. The stone caught firelight, sending blue-green sparks dancing. It reminds me of your eyes, Terry said, his voice rough with emotion. Of the sea during that storm, of everything that brought us together. Christina gazed at the ring, then back at Terry. It's beautiful, she whispered. Perfect. Not a proper engagement, he reminded her, though his eyes shone with undisguised joy. Just a promise. Then let me make a promise too, Christina said, moving closer until mere inches separated them. Whatever happens in Boston, whatever challenges lie ahead, I won't push you away again. I'll let you in, all the way in. The double meaning wasn't lost on either of them. Heat bloomed between them. 6 years of separation and weeks of careful restraint, building toward inevitable release. Christina, Terry breathed, her name both question and answer. I'm not made of glass, she murmured, her hands rising to frame his face. The doctors cleared me weeks ago. I've just been afraid. Of what? Terry asked, his control visibly fraying as her fingers traced the contours of his face. Of how much I still want you, she admitted, vulnerability naked in her voice. Of how it might feel to have this again, only to lose it if my health takes a turn. Terry's hands settled at her waist, solid and warm. You won't lose me, he promised. Not to fear, not to illness, not to anything but your own choice. Then I choose this, Christina whispered, closing the final distance between them. I choose us. Their lips met as lightning flashed outside, nature once again bearing witness. To their union, what began as tentative exploration quickly deepened into something more primal. 6 years of separation, weeks of restraint, and the shadow of mortality itself creating an urgency neither could deny. Terry drew back just enough to meet her eyes, his own dark with desire. "Are you certain?" In answer, Christina rose from the sofa, taking his hand. Without words, she led him down the familiar hallway to her bedroom, the same room where they had first discovered each other during a different storm, on a different night that had altered both their lives. The room was different now. Touches of Lily visible in a stuffed animal forgotten on a chair, a child's drawing taped to the mirror. But as rain lashed the windows and thunder rolled across the sky, time seemed to fold back on itself, creating a perfect symmetry between past and present. They came together with the desperate tenderness of those who have nearly lost each other, hands relearning forgotten landscapes, lips reclaiming territory once surrendered. Christina's silver ring caught moonlight filtered through rain-streaked windows as her fingers tangled in Terry's hair, drawing him closer. "I never stopped wanting you," Terry confessed against her skin. "Not for a single day in 6 years." "Show me," Christina breathed, arching beneath his touch. "Make me believe it." What followed transcended their first night together. That had been discovery, exploration, the thrill of the unknown. This was homecoming, recognition, the profound relief of finding what was thought lost forever. Where their first union had been wrapped in storm and secrecy, this one contained something deeper, the acknowledgement of shared history, shared pain, and now shared future. Later, wrapped in each other's arms, as the storm gradually subsided outside, Christina traced idle patterns on Terry's chest, her ring occasionally catching the dying firelight from the other room. "What will we tell Lily?" she asked. Practical. Concerns returning as passion's haze receded. Terry smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "The truth. That her bedtime wish came true. We're going to be a real family. All 3 of us." "A family," Christina repeated, savoring the word. "It sounds terrifying," Terry suggested with gentle humor. "Overwhelming." "Perfect," Christina corrected, nestling closer. "It sounds perfect." Outside, the storm had passed completely, leaving behind that particular stillness that follows. Nature's fury. Stars reappeared through breaks in the clouds, reflecting in puddles below the cottage windows. The sky above mirrored in the earth below, creating a sense of infinite possibility. Inside, 2 people who had found each other, lost each other, and found each other again lay intertwined, their heartbeats synchronizing as sleep approached. Tomorrow would bring practical concerns. Boston arrangements, treatment schedules, explanations for Lily. But tonight was for this reconnection, this affirmation that some bonds, once formed, could withstand any storm, even those that raged within the human heart and body. As Christina drifted towards sleep in Terry's arms, she felt something she had not fully experienced since his departure 6 years ago. Peace. Complete, unguarded peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, not as perfect fairy tale characters living happily ever after, but as real people who had chosen each other despite pain, despite fear, despite the uncertainty that shadowed all human lives. In the end, she reflected as consciousness faded, that was the truest kind of love story, not one that denied darkness, but one that created light within it, strong enough to illuminate even the longest night, bright enough to cast shadows running backward through time, touching even the storm that had first brought them together with its golden glow. Chapter 9. The Second Twist. Lost Time. Boston in winter held a different kind of beauty than there. coastal town, less wild, more structured, with snow that transformed the city into something hushed and reverent. From the window of their temporary apartment, Christina watched fat flakes descend, coating bare tree branches and iron railings with pristine white, each crystalline form unique and perfect in its brief existence. 3 months of treatment had left their mark on her body, hair grown thinner, curves softened to angles, but the doctor spoke increasingly of recovery rather than management. Hope, cautious but real, had taken root alongside the fear that had been her constant companion since diagnosis. The word remission had been whispered during her last appointment, a sacred possibility neither she nor Terry dared examine too closely yet. Behind her in the apartment's cozy living room, Terry and Lily worked on a puzzle spread across the coffee table. Their easy laughter warmed Christina more effectively than the radiator's steady heat. They had adapted to city life with surprising grace, Lily attending a local school where she'd made friends despite knowing their stay was temporary, Terry working remotely and handling her treatments with a steady devotion that still humbled. Christina daily. The silver ring on Christina's finger caught the winter light, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the frost-etched window. Not quite an engagement ring, not quite a promise ring, but something uniquely theirs, a tangible reminder of the night they had reconnected, body and soul, before coming to Boston. The night they had silently promised each other whatever time they might have left, whether decades or mere moments. "Mommy, come see," Lily called. "We finished the lighthouse." Christina turned from her contemplation of the snow, smiling at the domestic scene before her. In these past months, Lily had blossomed in Terry's constant presence, her natural confidence strengthened by the security of having both parents united in their love for her. "It looks perfect," Christina said, joining them on the sofa, her body fitting naturally into the space they created for her. "Daddy says when we go home we can visit a real lighthouse," Lily informed her, eyes bright with anticipation. "One you can climb all the way to the top and see forever in every direction." Home. The word resonated differently now. Once, it had meant only the cottage on the cliff, her sanctuary, her fortress. Now it encompassed something less tangible but more profound, wherever the three of them were together. The cottage remained its physical center, waiting for their return once treatment concluded, but home had transcended mere geography. "That sounds wonderful," Christina agreed, her fingers automatically finding Terry's where they rested on the sofa between them. This casual intimacy, touch without thought or hesitation, still felt like a miracle after so many years of self-containment. Terry's thumb traced gentle patterns against her skin, a subtle caress that spoke volumes. These quiet moments of connection had become their silent language during difficult treatment days when words felt inadequate. "How are you feeling today?" he asked quietly, while Lily began work on another section of the puzzle, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration, so like her father that it made Christina's heart squeeze with tenderness. "Better," Christina answered truthfully. "The new medication doesn't make me as tired. I actually feel like painting today." Terry's smile conveyed both relief and lingering concern, the expression she'd come to know intimately during these months of treatment. The balance he maintained, support without smothering, care without pity, had been her foundation through the darkest days. "Good enough for a surprise?" he asked, eyes warming with something that sparked her curiosity. Christina raised an eyebrow. "What kind of surprise?" "I found a letter in our mail forwarding from home," Terry explained, "from someone named Eleanor Bishop. The return address is a nursing home about 20 miles from here." Christina stiffened, the name triggering a cascade of memories that tumbled through her mind like autumn leaves. "Eleanor? Are you sure?" Terry nodded, reaching into his pocket to produce an envelope slightly yellowed with age. "It's addressed to you." I didn't open it, of course. With fingers that suddenly trembled, Christina accepted the letter. Eleanor Bishop was my neighbor. Before Lily was born, she watched my cottage when I went to stay with my grandmother. Her voice trailed off as realization dawned. She moved away to live with her daughter in Massachusetts. I lost touch with her years ago. Terry's expression shifted, alert to the undertone in her voice. Is everything okay? I don't know, Christina admitted, turning the envelope over in her hands. It's just strange timing, almost like the universe is trying to tell us something. She opened the letter carefully, unfolding thin stationery covered in shaky handwriting that still retained echoes of elegant penmanship. As she read, her face drained of color, her eyes widening with each line they consumed. Christina. Terry's concern was immediate, his hand moving to cover hers. What is it? I need to see her, Christina said, looking up from the letter with an expression Terry couldn't quite interpret. Shock mingled with something that might have been dawning hope or deepening pain. Today, if possible. She's not well, according to this. She wants to speak with me about something important from the past. Terry didn't hesitate. I'll arrange it. Lily has a play date with her friend from school this afternoon. I can drop her there and take you to the nursing home. Christina's hand found his, squeezing with wordless gratitude. Whatever the letter contained, beyond the simple request for a visit, she couldn't bring herself to share it yet. Not until she'd heard Eleanor's words directly, not until she knew whether the impossible coincidence suggested in those shaky lines could possibly be true. The nursing home was pleasantly appointed, but carried that distinctive institutional atmosphere no amount of cheerful decor could fully disguise. A sympathetic nurse led them to a private room near the garden courtyard, explaining that Mrs. Bishop had good days and bad days, but had been anticipating this visit with particular clarity. She's been asking for you for weeks, the nurse told Christina. Ever since she saw your name in an art magazine. There was an article about your gallery exhibition back home. Christina exchanged a glance with Terry. Her most recent exhibition had opened just before her diagnosis, a showing of seascapes that had garnered unexpected attention from a national publication. The nurse paused outside a door decorated with pressed flowers. She may tire quickly, but she's been very insistent about speaking with you. With a gentle knock, she opened the door and ushered them inside. Private room near the garden courtyard, explaining that Mrs. Bishop had good days and bad days, but had been anticipating this visit with particular clarity. She's been asking for you for weeks, the nurse told Christina. Ever since she saw your name in an art magazine. There was an article about your gallery exhibition back home. Christina exchanged a glance with Terry. Her most recent exhibition had opened just before her diagnosis, a showing of seascapes that had garnered unexpected attention from a national publication. The nurse paused outside a door decorated with pressed flowers. She may tire quickly, but she's been very insistent about speaking with you. With a gentle knock, she opened the door and ushered them inside. Eleanor Bishop sat in a comfortable chair by the window, winter light illuminating her like a Renaissance painting. Time had etched deep lines in her face since Christina had last seen her, but her eyes remained sharp and bright, taking in her visitors with obvious recognition. Christina, she said, her voice thin but steady. You came, and this must be Terry Lamb, he introduced himself, stepping forward to take the fragile hand she extended. Eleanor's gaze moved between them, a knowing smile touching her lips. So you found each other after all, she murmured. I've hoped for that for so many years. Christina moved closer, settling into the chair indicated beside Eleanor's. Your letter, Eleanor, what did you mean about a visitor looking for me, about a misunderstanding? The elderly woman's expression grew solemn. I've carried this regret for too long, my dear. My memory isn't what it once was, but some things remain crystal clear, like that morning, about a month after the big storm that nearly took my roof off. Christina's breath caught. Terry moved to stand behind her chair, his hand settling on her shoulder in unconscious support. A handsome young man came to your cottage, Eleanor continued, her gaze distant with memory. You were away, caring for your grandmother in her final days. He had flowers, wild flowers gathered from the cliffside. He seemed disappointed when I told him you were gone. Christina's hand rose to cover her mouth. Someone came looking for me. Eleanor nodded slowly. He asked when you'd return. I told him I wasn't certain, that your grandmother's condition was grave and you might be gone. For some time, her weathered hand moved to cover Christina's. He seemed so deflated, like all the air had gone out of him. He left the flowers with me, asked me to tell you he'd been there. Did he leave a name? Terry asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Eleanor's brow furrowed. I believe he did, but names slip away from me now. I remember thinking he seemed well off, though simply dressed, educated in his speech. What happened to the flowers? Christina asked, her heart pounding so forcefully she was certain Eleanor must hear it. Shame flickered across the older woman's, her face. This is my regret, dear. I meant to leave them with a note, but my arthritis was particularly bad that day. I simply left a note saying, someone came looking for you. He's sorry he missed you. I put it in your mailbox. Christina's eyes flew to Terry's, wide with realization. The note, she whispered, the one I found when I returned. I always thought... You thought I sent it, Terry finished, the pieces falling into place with devastating clarity. That I was apologizing for leaving, for the money. Eleanor looked between them, confusion evident. You didn't know it was him? She asked Christina. But surely, when you returned... I never went back, Terry said, his voice hollow with the weight of lost opportunity. I thought, when I saw the cottage empty, I assumed Christina had moved on. I convinced myself that night meant more to me than to her. And I thought the note was from you, Christina said, rising to face him. A final apology, dismissing what we'd shared. It only reinforced my belief that the money was payment. Eleanor's frail hand reached for both of theirs. Oh, my dears, such a simple misunderstanding, such a terrible cost. Christina felt tears gathering, hot and insistent. You came back, she whispered to Terry. You actually came back for me. 1 month later, Terry confirmed, his own eyes bright with moisture. I couldn't stop thinking about you, about that night. I drove up the coast with no real plan beyond seeing you again, talking to you in daylight, asking if what I'd felt had been real or imagined. And I was gone, Christina said, the cruel irony of timing striking her anew, caring for my grandmother in her final days. When I returned 6 weeks later, there was no sign anyone had looked for me, she continued, the pieces of their shared past rearranging themselves into a new, heartbreaking pattern. Just that cryptic note that seemed to confirm you'd washed your hands of me. Eleanor watched them with eyes that had witnessed nearly a century of human joy and sorrow. I've carried this regret since I realized the misunderstanding, she said softly. When I became ill last year and began sorting through old memories, preparing to leave this world, it weighed on me heavily. Then I saw your picture in that magazine and learned you were in Boston for treatment. A smile touched her papery lips. Providence, perhaps, a chance to right an old wrong before I go. Terry knelt beside Christina's chair, taking both her hands in his. 6 years, he said, voice rough with emotion. We lost 6 years because of crossed paths and misread signs. Not entirely lost, Christina corrected gently, thinking of Lily. We gained her, and perhaps we needed those years apart to become the people who could truly find each other again. Eleanor watched them with wise, tired eyes. Time is precious, my dears, I've lived long enough to know that love, when genuine, is the rarest treasure of all. Don't waste another moment in regret for what cannot be changed." As if her words had broken some final barrier between them, Terry drew Christina into his arms, holding her as if she might disappear if he loosened his grip. The realization of how close they had come to reconnecting 6 years ago and how narrowly they had missed that chance lent their embrace a desperate intensity. "Thank you," Christina said to Eleanor over Terry's shoulder, tears flowing freely. "Now, for finding the courage to tell us." The elderly woman smiled serenely. "I can go peacefully now, knowing I've undone at least one knot in the tapestry." Her eyes drifted closed, fatigue evident in her slackening features. "Be happy, my dears. Make up for lost time." Later, in the taxi returning to their temporary Boston home, Christina and Terry sat in stunned silence, hands clasped tightly between them. The revelation had thrown their shared history into entirely new light. What had seemed like deliberate abandonment revealed as tragic misalignment. What had felt like rejection exposed as its opposite. "I keep thinking," Terry finally said, his voice low and intimate in the taxi's dimness, "about parallel lives. About the life we might have had if I'd returned a week earlier, or you a week later. If we'd connected that day instead of missing each other." Christina leaned her head against his shoulder, watching snowflakes dance in the taxi's headlights. Or if Eleanor had been more specific in her note. Or if I'd asked her about it when I returned. "We might have had those 6 years together," Terry said, the weight of lost time evident in his voice. "Watched Lily grow together from the beginning." Christina turned to face him, her hand rising to cup his cheek. "But would we have appreciated it as deeply as we do now? Would we have understood the preciousness of what we had if we hadn't first lost it?" Terry covered her hand with his own, turning to press a kiss to her palm. "All I know is that I don't want to waste another moment wondering what might have been. I only want to focus on what can be from this moment forward." As the taxi navigated Boston's snow-dusted streets, Christina felt something shift within her, a weight lifting, a lingering question finally answered. For 6 years, she had carried the belief that Terry had discarded what they'd shared as meaningless. Now she understood the truth. He had valued it enough to return, to seek her out, to try again. The misunderstanding that had cost them 6 years could not be undone. But in its revelation lay a profound gift. The knowledge that their connection had never been one-sided, that what had bloomed between them during that stormy night had been equally powerful for both. What seemed like ending had actually been interrupted beginning, and now, against all odds, they had been granted a second chance, a chance to reclaim not just what had been lost, but to create something new and stronger from the ashes of misunderstanding. As the taxi turned onto their street, Christina made a silent vow. Not another day would pass in holding back, in fear, in doubt. Life had shown its fragility through her illness, its preciousness through their daughter, its strange and wonderful symmetry through Eleanor's revelation. Whatever time remained, whether years or decades, would be lived fully, loved completely, cherished absolutely. The universe had conspired to bring them together, not once, but twice. This time, they would not let go. Chapter 10. Full Circle. Spring had returned to the coastal town, carpeting the cliffs with wildflowers. Christina stood on the cottage porch, breathing deeply of salt-laden air after the long months in Boston. Her body felt increasingly her own again, strength returning with each passing day. "Final box unpacked," Terry announced, joining her at the railing. "We are officially home." Home. What had once been Christina's solitary refuge now pulsed with the vibrant energy of family life. Terry's arms encircled her from behind. "Penny, for your thoughts? I was thinking about circles," Christina replied, leaning back into his embrace. How life brings us back to the same places, but we experience them differently each time. The doctors called while you were unpacking, she added, turning in his arms. The latest scans are clear. 6 more months of monitoring, but they're using words like remarkable recovery. Joy transformed Terry's features as he pulled her into a fierce embrace. That's everything. Where's Lily? Christina asked as they finally separated. Mrs. Wilson took her to see the new foal. She'll bring her home before dinner. A smile played at his lips, which gives us a rare moment of solitude. The invitation in his voice sent warmth spreading through Christina's body. Before they could act on the desire kindling between them, Terry guided her to the porch swing and withdrew an envelope from his pocket. "What's this?" Christina asked. "Something I've been wanting to share with you," Terry explained. "Open it." Inside the envelope, Christina found documents bearing the logo of the Coastal Towns Development Authority. "You're buying the land adjacent to my gallery?" she asked. "For what purpose?" "For the past months, I've been thinking about our future here," Terry said. "I've been working with an architect to design a cultural center for the town, a proper showcase for local artists, with your gallery as its centerpiece." Christina stared at him in stunned silence. "This is enormous. The investment, worth every penny," he finished firmly. "I've spent years accumulating wealth without purpose. This feels right, using resources to nurture art, to create a legacy beyond ourselves." Tears gathered in Christina's eyes as she recognized the culmination of Terry's transformation from the man who had once left money on her pillow to one who understood that true value lay in connection. "There's more," Terry continued, reaching again into his pocket. This time, he withdrew a small velvet box of deep blue. Christina's breath caught in her throat. "When we met 6 years ago," Terry said softly, "I had no way of knowing that night would change the course of my life, that it would give me our daughter, that it would eventually lead me back to you." He opened the box, revealing a ring of platinum and sapphire that caught the afternoon light, the exact color of her eyes, and the ocean they both loved. "Christina, Jackson, will you marry me? Not because of Lily, not because of what we've endured together, but because I love you with a depth I never knew was possible before you." "Yes," Christina whispered, thick with emotion. "Of course, yes." As Terry slipped the ring onto her finger, the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, bathing them in golden light. Their kiss tasted of salt and promise, of battles survived and futures imagined. 6 months later, as summer reached its zenith, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. With Christina's final scans confirming full remission, the timing felt perfect for a wedding that had never been intended as conventional. Inside the cottage, Christina stood before the mirror in her simple ivory dress, her hair grown back with a natural wave that caught the fading light from the window. "You look like a princess in a painting, Mommy," Lily said, resplendent in her flower girl dress. "Daddy looks handsome too, but he's nervous," she confided. "He keeps touching his tie and asking Uncle James if everything's perfect." Christina smiled. "Tell Daddy I'll be right there and that everything is already perfect because he's waiting for me." Lightning flashed across the darkening sky as Christina reached the bluff where their small wedding party awaited. Terry waited beneath an arbor woven with wildflowers, his expression transforming from nervous anticipation to adoration as she appeared. The symmetry was not lost on either of them. The same lighting that had first revealed him to her doorstep during that fateful storm now illuminated their union. The ceremony was brief, but deeply personal, vows promising not perfection, but presence, not ease, but endurance, not mere passion, but profound partnership. As they exchanged rings, simple platinum bands inscribed with "Always," the first raindrops began to fall. "By the power vested in me," the minister continued, rain streaking his face, "I pronounce you husband and wife." their kiss witnessed by sky and sea, tasted of rain and salt and infinite possibility. Later, when guests had departed and Lily slept at Mrs. Wilson's, Christina and Terry stood on their rain-washed porch, watching the storm gradually subside. "Mrs. Lamb," Terry murmured, nuzzling the sensitive spot below her ear. "How does it sound?" "Unfamiliar," Christina admitted, leaning back against his chest. "But I'm looking forward to growing accustomed to it." "Do you remember what you said that night?" Terry asked. "About why you painted storms?" Christina nodded. "I said they reveal the true nature of things. In ordinary light, we see surfaces, but lightning illuminates essence." "You were right," Terry said, turning her in his arms. Raindrops clung to his eyelashes and lips. Every storm in our lives has stripped away another layer of pretense, of fear. What remains is what's true. Christina's hands rose to frame his face. "And what is true, Terry Lamb?" His answer came in a kiss, deep and passionate, carrying the weight of their shared history and the boundless potential of their future. Without speaking, they moved inside. Their bedroom, transformed with candles reminiscent of their first night, awaited this new beginning. Not strangers finding temporary shelter, but partners choosing permanent harbor in each other's hearts. "I love you," Christina whispered against his lips, as their bodies joined in perfect synchronicity. "Always," Terry answered, his voice rough with emotion as they moved together in the candlelight, creating a new memory to replace the one that had haunted them for 6 years. Not an ending this time, but a beginning without end. Outside, the storm gradually subsided, stars emerging in its wake. Inside, two souls who had found each other, lost each other, and found each other again, discovered what had been true all along, that some connections, once forged in lightning and thunder, cannot be broken by time or misunderstanding or even fear itself.